Okay, somber scrollers. Let's re-enter that shadowed space where hope meets horror. Tonight, we revisit the treacherous landscape of the first date, but through a different lens. The awkward silences, the forced smiles, we know them well. But what happens when the person across the table isn't just awkward, but incomplete? When their charm feels like a carefully constructed veneer over something hollow and cold? This story is about that icy realization. The moment fascination flips into fear, and the desperate need to escape a connection that feels fundamentally wrong. We're calling this version Her Stillness, His Gaze. Our focus tonight is Chloe. Late 20s, an interior designer with a keen eye for balance and flow, working meticulously to bring harmony to spaces. Her own life, however, felt slightly off-kilter. A demanding job often left her drained, and the sprawling city, while vibrant, could feel isolating. A relationship had ended the previous year, leaving not heartbreak, but a quiet echo of absence she longed to fill. Like so many, she turned to the apps. Swiping through Nexus felt like flipping through a magazine of curated lives. Polished photos, witty but generic bios. She approached it with cautious optimism, hoping for a flicker of genuine connection amidst the digital performance. Most interactions were forgettable. Polite fade-outs, mismatched vibes, the occasional unsolicited gym selfie. Then she matched with Elias. His profile was magnetic, possessing an understated intensity that stood out. No boastful travel shots or grinning group photos. Instead, a few moody artistic pictures. One looking thoughtfully over a Rain Street cityscape. Another a close-up of hands holding an old leather-bound book. Sunlight catching the dust motes. The main photo showed him looking directly at the camera. A subtle, almost imperceptible smile on his lips. His eyes were the arresting feature. Deep set, dark, seeming to hold a quiet gravity. His bio was sparse, intriguing. Curator of quiet moments, seeking depth in the transient. Tell me what you truly see. Chloe was captivated. She sent the first message, a comment on the cityscape photo. Elias replied promptly, his messages articulate, almost formal, devoid of casual slang or excessive emojis. He asked insightful questions about her design philosophy, about the interplay of light and shadow in spaces, about finding beauty in overlooked details. It felt less like texting and more like a thoughtful correspondence from another era. There was a focused intensity to him, even through the screen, that Chloe found compelling. He seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts, her perspective. When Elias suggested meeting for drinks at a dimly lit, sophisticated bar called the Velvet Hour, known for its vintage decor and hushed ambiance, Chloe felt a rare thrill of real anticipation. She took care getting ready, choosing a simple but elegant dark green dress, heels that clicked softly, a touch of perfume. She arrived exactly on time, navigating the plush velvet ropes to find a secluded booth upholstered in deep crimson. The low lighting threw soft shadows, the air thick with the scent of old wood and expensive spirits. She checked her phone. 8 p.m. precisely. As she looked up towards the entrance, Elias was simply there. Not walking in, not pausing, just standing framed in the archway, as if the stroke of the hour had conjured him into existence. He was even more striking in person than his photos suggested. Tall, lean, dressed impeccably in dark trousers, a crisp white shirt, and a tailored charcoal blazer. His dark hair was neatly combed, and those eyes, they were even more penetrating, scanning the room and landing on her instantly. He moved towards the booth with a fluid, deliberate grace that felt almost unnaturally smooth. "Chloe?" His voice was a resonant baritone, calm and measured, holding that same formal cadence as his messages. "Elias, hi," Chloe smiled, gesturing to the seat opposite. "You found it okay?" "Precision is important," Elias replied, sliding into the booth. He didn't adjust his jacket or shift in his seat. He simply settled, perfectly composed, his hands resting lightly on the polished table. Moments should be met, not chased. An unusual turn of phrase, but Chloe attributed it to the artistic sensibility she'd found appealing online. A waiter materialized almost instantly. Elias ordered a Sazerac, naming a specific rye brand, without a glance at the menu. Chloe, feeling slightly mesmerized, asked for a glass of Sauvignon Blanc. The conversation began easily. They touched on themes from their messages. His interest in forgotten histories, her passion for transforming spaces. Elias listened intently, his gaze unwavering. He spoke about his own pursuits, describing himself vaguely as a curator, someone who documented and preserved things others overlooked. Fragments of permanence, he called them. But as they talked, Chloe began to notice something deeply unsettling. Elias was preternaturally still. It wasn't just good posture or calm nerves. It was an almost complete lack of extraneous movement. No fidgeting, no shifting weight, no unconscious hand gestures accompanying his speech. His stillness was absolute, like a perfectly posed photograph. Even his breathing seemed shallow, controlled. His blinks were infrequent, slow, deliberate closures of his dark eyes. Chloe tried to rationalize it. Maybe he practiced meditation? Maybe he was just incredibly self-controlled. But the stillness felt less like discipline and more like an absence. An absence of the tiny, involuntary movements that signal life, nervousness, the messy authenticity of being human. It was like conversing with a beautiful, articulate mannequin. "Your attention to detail must be profound in your work," Elias observed suddenly, his eyes fixed on her face with an unnerving focus that felt less like admiration and more like scrutiny. The way you choose textures, colors, creating harmony from potential chaos. He paused. Does the fleeting nature of trends ever frustrate you? Knowing that beautiful designs will inevitably be replaced? Chloe felt a flicker of unease. Well, evolution is part of design, she countered, trying to keep her tone light. Spaces need to adapt to the people living in them. There's beauty in change too. Elias tilted his head slightly, a slow, almost mechanical movement. Change introduces imperfection, dilution. True beauty lies in capturing a perfect state and holding it, protecting it from the erosion of time. He picked up his sazerac, swirling the amber liquid. He didn't drink, just watched the light fracture through the glass. The conversation continued, but Chloe felt increasingly like she was navigating a minefield. Elias skillfully deflected personal questions, turning them into philosophical musings on memory, perception, and the value of stillness. He seemed less interested in getting to know her and more interested in observing her reactions, studying her like an object. When the waiter approached to offer another drink, Elias dismissed him with a subtle, barely perceptible hand gesture. Before the man could even speak, his intense gaze never leaving Chloe's face. It wasn't outright rudeness, just a chilling assertion of control, as if the waiter were a minor distraction in his focused observation. Then came the moment that sent ice water through Chloe's veins. She casually mentioned enjoying a quiet lunch break earlier that day, sketching a design idea in her notebook while sitting on a particular bench in the small, historic square near her office. Elias offered that faint, enigmatic smile again. Ah, yes, Hanover Square. The wrought iron bench facing the old clock tower. You were there around 1:30 p.m. You had your hair tied back with a burgundy velvet ribbon. You tapped your pen thoughtfully against your chin several times before starting to draw. Chloe froze, her wine glass halfway to her lips. Her blood turned cold. How could you possibly know that? She hadn't mentioned the square's name, the specific bench, the ribbon, the nervous habit with her pen. It was a private, insignificant moment. She hadn't posted anything about it. Elias's expression remained placidly intense. I observe, he stated simply, as if explaining the weather. It's what I do. I find value in quiet moments, in details others miss. I happened to be passing through the square today. He paused, his eyes seeming to darken slightly. You were very contained, focused, still in your own way. It was noteworthy. The implication crashed down on her. He hadn't just passed by. He'd watched her, intentionally, studied her. Before their date, the Nexus match suddenly felt sinister, less like chance and more like surveillance. Chloe's composure, usually so carefully maintained, began to fray. The elegant bar suddenly felt claustrophobic, the low lighting oppressive, Elias's stillness suffocating. She needed fresh air. She needed to escape his unwavering gaze. "You know, Elias," Chloe began, striving for a casual tone, "it's been lovely, but I should probably think about heading home. Early start tomorrow." "Surely not yet," Elias countered, his voice smooth, almost hypnotic, cutting her off gently but firmly. "The evening is still unfolding, and our conversation feels incomplete." He finally took a slow, deliberate sip of his Sazerac. "Besides, I was hoping we might walk for a while. The city takes on a different character after dark, quieter, more essential. Perhaps through the square you mentioned?" The suggestion, which might have sounded romantic from anyone else, now felt deeply menacing. The square, where he'd watched her? The bill appeared silently on the table, already settled. Chloe hadn't seen the waiter approach or leave. Elias had handled it with unnerving efficiency. Chloe felt trapped between social convention and rising panic. Making a scene seemed impossible. Elias wasn't aggressive, just insistent. His calm intensity making refusal feel difficult, almost rude. Against her better judgment, propelled by a strange mixture of fear and a bizarre inability to break the encounter's spell, she heard herself agree. "All right, a short walk then." Outside, the crisp night air was a welcome shock, but the feeling of being ensnared remained. Elias walked beside her, his stride smooth, silent on the pavement. The usual city sounds seemed distant, muted. Chloe was acutely aware of his presence, his unnerving lack of casual movement. They reached Hanover Square. It was mostly deserted now, bathed in the cool, slightly eerie glow of old-fashioned street lamps. The clock tower loomed, its hands frozen. Elias had mentioned earlier it was under repair, another detail she hadn't offered. He stopped near the very bench Chloe had occupied hours before. "Here," Elias said softly, turning to her. In the shadowy light, his features seemed sharper, less human. "This is where you were, so absorbed, so unaware of the gaze." Chloe took an involuntary step back, her heel catching slightly on a cobblestone. "Elias, this feels really strange. I think I'm going to go now." "Go?" Elias tilted his head again, that slow, deliberate motion, like a bird of prey assessing its quarry. "But the stillness is just beginning to settle." He moved closer, invading her personal space. His stillness was absolute now, radiating an unnerving coldness. "Listen, Chloe. The city noise fades. The distractions dissolve. All that remains are the true forms, the essential lines, the moments between heartbeats." He reached out, his fingers brushing the velvet ribbon in her hair, the one he'd mentioned earlier. Chloe flinched violently. His touch was shockingly cold, like touching porcelain or chilled metal. "You feel it," Elias stated, his voice a low murmur. "The coldness of preservation. Most people are a chaotic shimmer of warmth and pointless motion. They decay, they fade. But stillness endures." Chloe finally understood. This wasn't just eccentricity or an artistic quirk. This was a chilling, detached obsession. The quiet moments he curated, the permanence he sought. It wasn't metaphorical. "Stay away from me," Chloe said, her voice tight with fear. Finding a surge of adrenaline, she turned sharply, intending to walk quickly, purposely, towards the nearest main street. She didn't hear footsteps behind her immediately, only the unnerving city silence amplified by her pounding heart. She risked a terrified glance over her shoulder. Elias hadn't moved from the bench. He stood perfectly still, a tall silhouette against the faint glow from a nearby building. But his head was turned, his gaze fixed on her, tracking her movement across the square. Then he moved. It defied logic. One instant, he was by the bench, several yards away. The next, he was standing silently under the next lamppost along her path, utterly still again, as if he'd simply appeared there in the time it took her heart to beat twice. The space between seconds. Raw panic seized Chloe. She abandoned any pretense of calm and ran, her heels clattering desperately on the uneven stones. She didn't dare look back again. She could feel his presence, not chasing in a conventional sense, but somehow closing the distance in those terrifying, instantaneous shifts between absolute stillness and impossible speed. It was like being stalked by something that flickered in and out of normal time. She burst out of the square onto a busier street, gasping for air, frantically scanning for a taxi. Headlights approached. She waved frantically, stumbling slightly as the cab pulled over. "Just drive, please go," she choked out, giving the driver her address, her voice shaking uncontrollably. As the taxi sped away, she forced herself to look back through the rear window. Standing on the corner where the square met the street, bathed in the harsh artificial light, was Elias, perfectly still, watching the taxi recede. His expression, even distorted by distance and the taxi's window, seemed calm, detached, perhaps even faintly satisfied, like a collector who had observed a rare specimen in its natural habitat. Chloe didn't unlock the tension in her shoulders until the taxi pulled up outside her apartment building with its brightly lit lobby and overnight concierge. She paid the driver with trembling hands, hurried inside, and leaned heavily against her apartment door after triple locking it, her body shaking. She immediately grabbed her phone, her fingers clumsy with residual fear, blocked Elias on Nexus, deleted the app, blocked his number. She paced her living room, the familiar space suddenly feeling alien and vulnerable. Every shadow seemed too deep. Every floorboard creak sounded like an intrusion. The stillness Elias craved felt deafening, pregnant with threat. Sleep was a distant country she couldn't reach. She kept seeing Elias's eyes, feeling that unnatural coldness, picturing his impossible movement. His words echoed in her mind. Preservation, stillness, capturing moments. What did he truly mean by capture? What permanence was he seeking in the city's quiet corners? A shudder traced its way down her spine. The following days were steeped in anxiety. Chloe found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, scrutinizing faces in crowds, jumping at sudden noises. She considered reporting it, but the encounter felt too bizarre, too subjective. My date was unnervingly still, knew things he shouldn't, and moved weirdly fast. It sounded like a delusion. She was left with the chilling certainty of the experience, but no tangible proof of malice. She threw herself into her work, finding solace in the concrete demands of design, in creating order. But the feeling of being watched lingered, a cold presence at the edge of her perception. About a week later, a small, stiff envelope arrived in her mail. Plain white, her name and address printed in neat, precise, almost mechanical lettering. No return address. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she tore it open with shaking hands. Inside, protected by a sheet of black cardstock, was a single photograph. It was a black and white print, starkly beautiful, technically flawless. It depicted Chloe sitting in the crimson booth at the velvet hour. She was leaning forward slightly, listening intently, a subtle furrow of confusion and nascent fear creasing her brow, caught in that exact moment before her unease fully bloomed. The lighting was dramatic, chiaroscuro, isolating her in the frame, the background melting into soft focus. The truly terrifying aspect was the impossible stillness of the image. It wasn't just a snapshot. It felt frozen. Every detail was preternaturally sharp. The texture of the velvet upholstery, the reflection in her eyes, the slight tension in her hand resting near her wineglass. She looked utterly, perfectly still, captured and held fast against the flow of time, exactly as Elias desired. There was no note. There didn't need to be. The photograph screamed its message. I saw you. I captured your stillness. You are a piece in my collection. Chloe moved apartments a few months later. She changed her number, scrubbed her online presence, avoided dating apps like the plague. She never heard from Elias directly again. But the fear never entirely left. Sometimes, when working late, alone in the quiet intensity of her focus, she feels a sudden chill, a sense of being observed. She catches a flicker of movement in her peripheral vision, something impossibly fast that vanishes when she turns. She sees her reflection in a dark window pane, and for a terrifying split second, sees herself utterly, unnaturally still. And she wonders about Elias. Is he still out there, moving through the city's shadows? Still curating his quiet moments? Still searching for subjects, observing them, appreciating their potential for perfect, permanent stillness, waiting to capture them with his chilling gaze. So, somber scrollers, remember Chloe. Remember the stillness, the gaze. When you step out to meet someone new, look beyond the charming facade. Trust that gut feeling, that whisper of wrongness. Because sometimes the person seeking connection isn't looking for a partner, but for a specimen. Someone to capture, to preserve, to add to a collection hidden in the shadows. Until next time, be aware of who's watching, and be careful who you allow into your moments of quiet focus. This is the Somber Scroll, disappearing back into the stillness.